The desires yesterday accumulated in what is a frightful wish, forged in the fictitious fires and the wickedness of our forgotten past. Still, are we destined to be on timely path of righteousness, or forced to maneuver in the course we must dismiss? Decades ago, they were screaming from their stretched limousines on the way to the Oscars and clamoring from inside their overpriced coffee shops about global warming and climate change. Sometimes they would call it extreme weather. It was the hollow, echoing sound of long-dead late-night hosts. Between their bitter laughs, they would interchange global warming, climate change, and extreme weather as skillfully as a street hustler would interchange plastic cups, hiding a small rubber ball of truth. So very tightly they would hold on to their tokens. President Charlotte Roham Clinton remembers it well, sitting on the edge of her old world canopy bed. In the 10 years past, it has only gotten colder and colder. Some climatologists call it another ice age caused by momentary diminishing of the sun's thermal intensity, which froze the Earth into an Arctic icebox. At least that's what it felt like to Charlotte. Other climatologists say it was caused by the cumulative effects of the world's population, theorizing man-made emissions created a stream of particulates that clogged the skies, blocking out the sunlight. All Charlotte knew was it made the winters unbearable here in Sarkeesian, D.C. We could do with some global warming right about now, she thought. She then cursed the rolling blackouts and the reliance on the automen. Through 4-inch bulletproof glass and past elegant white drapes, the sunlight beamed into the room, striking giant glass balls colored with the glow of aqua and the shine of silver, creating fractal patterns across the paneling and golden wallpaper. She was at least comfortable by her surroundings. Just the thought of New Year's Eve celebration had her shivering. She shook the sleeplessness from her troubled head, hoping 2057 would be a better year. She lived high above the lowest subject in her empire. Some joked that it was still a democracy, but that pretense has long since seen its last day. She was a little worse for wear, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She knew her place. She was part of a great dynasty, remembering when she was a small child, as fresh and sweet as sliced pineapple, and her grandmother, President Roham Clinton, was the 45th Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States. Her grandmother had the weight of the world on her shoulders. Now it was her turn. "Madame President," a staff member said after knocking on the door, "Dr. Anita Sarkeesian is here to see you. She told me it was an urgent matter." Time was a slippery fellow. What have the years made of us? Anita will be 82 this year. "Dear Anita, you have done so much for us. Our debt will never be repaid. Tell her I'll be down in a few minutes." President Chelsea Clinton, Clinton's mother, had appointed Dr. Anita Sarkeesian, a colossal tower of intellect in the feminist community, as feminism czar, who soon afterwards implemented Operation Roundup by the power of the presidency. This was the brainchild of prominent feminist and journalist Julie Bindel. Under the radical order, all men were forced into concentration camps, where they would be checked out like library books for pair bonding. The operation was executed by the military units of the Special Forces of the Code Pink Brigade, formed with an executive order by President Chelsea Clinton. The majority of the public didn't even notice the machinations. They were doped up on social media, the ever-expanding indulgences of streaming entertainment, while the overseeing government segregated the whole army into male and female units, with the women reluctantly allowing the transgender women squads to join their ranks. When the time came, it was like a perfect storm of estrogen that no man has ever seen. Wave after wave of ferocity descended like black widows to their awaiting prey. The CPB combined force of 1,000 generations of perceived oppression struck at dawn. The men in the military were helpless to fight back, for their numbers have dwindled precariously over the years. Mandates deemed what the polarity needed to be achieved, and then it was deemed that the polarity wasn't enough in the spirit of social justice. And under social justice, of course, fairness meant just what the champions of social justice wanted it to mean, so the laws and rules were bent to that moral good. In the end, men only made up 31% of the armed forces and about 20% of the officer corps and commanding brass. Once the roundup began, there were a few roughnecks who resisted. "Sir, we are surrounded," a crewman called out. "I think it's hopeless. Shall I negotiate our terms for surrender?" Captain Seymour looked over the green, lush battlefield with the dew of early morning and the hot with charred of explosive ordnance. He wanted to say never, but his face was frozen with fear, looking over his subordinate who has the instinct to become more professional with approaching danger. "Where's our reinforcements, crewman? Where's our vehicles? I thought we still had tanks and halos available." "The CBB jammed all our comlinks. We've been in a blackout for the last 10 minutes. Commander has ordered our remaining forces in this area. It looks like we are on our own, sir." Thousands died within hours of the CPB first strikes during half a dozen major skirmishes, but in the end the men lacked the wherewithal and desire to fire upon units comprised entirely by women and transgender women. The patriarchy surrendered that day. The defeat of the male sex was inevitable. Camps had to be constructed outside major cities, and supplies were shipped in on a weekly basis. For the women there was nothing but celebration. Within a month's time nothing stood that depicted a man, renaming every road and college bearing a man's name. Nothing was saved. Not since Martin Luther King Jr. gave his "I Have a Dream" speech around Lincoln Memorial have the crowds been this massive. Senator Valerie Melville stood on a dais overlooking the crowd. "My fellow women," she shouted out joyfully. If she could have sung her cries to the heavens, she would have. Fresh tears circled down her plump cheeks. "I've had a dream ever since I was a young college student studying feminist dance and taking women's studies that I would be an integral part of saving womankind from the evil clutches of the patriarchy, even if it meant scrubbing the men from the bedrocks. Ladies, we have done it." Museums got ramshacked, massive sculptures were beaten into rubble, and masterpiece paintings were set ablaze on bonfires. They stopped at the libraries only because books were too numerous to effect any meaningful demonstration. The feminist scholars needed time to converge their intellectual prowess to convert every biological book into a feminist biological book and every math book into a feminist math book. But they were more than motivated to cleanse the nation from the wickedness that was mankind. Mercifully, William Shakespeare was spared only because some feminists believe the speculations that a black woman named Emile Bacino was the real writer of Shakespeare's works. When the smoke cleared, the entire led female government announced a proclamation that the Second and First Amendments, as well as the right to vote, would be revoked for anyone who identified as a man. There were other plans to be passed by the two houses of Congress. After building walls around the male camps, it was proposed that there were thousands of male camps around the nation. In the end, it would succumb the realization if past presidents of the United States could never, despite promises and blustering, build a wall on the southern border, then how was the matriarchy going to take on such an immense task? Without their rights, mankind decided to bide their time and go along with the matriarchy ran the government. But they had their dignity, and they refused to be addressed as slaves. They had not intended to build prisons that would be used to lock them up or construct walls to box them in. Being adamant about their intentions, the matriarchy had no other choice than to take a different tack. If womankind couldn't keep mankind locked up, then they would keep men locked out. Dr. Anita Sarkeesian, the feminist czar, came up with what she thought was a brilliant plan. She designed a national zone system curriculum that created safe spaces for all women, known as no-go men's zone. She was a pure zealot in her feminist beliefs, dogmatically so, and was fueled by the recent subjugation of mankind. She had only one more move to make, to unleash the most supreme form of feminism. She called it no-choice feminism. NCF was diabolical in its application. It was meant to rob all women of their independence. The doctrine stated that women had no choice in what they did. They were like cards in a humongous house of cards, tens of millions of cards. If one woman turned away from the other cards, then this was thought to be an unforgivable sin, thought by Dr. Sarkeesian to lead to utter destruction of womankind. It's not enough coincidence, always men and boys committing mass shootings. The pattern is connected to ideas of toxic masculinity in our culture. That is why we must keep them out of our society for all time, she proclaimed. The matriarchy measured her words well. She was almost considered a saint within the deepest halls of academia and the highest pillars of government. If you didn't believe in NCF, you were a heretic who suffered from internal misogyny. Through her non-profit feminist frequency, she amassed a war chest of tens of billions of dollars. When she was not fighting the patriarchy, she was writing her many books and were required reading in all colleges. Relentlessly, she pushed her message any way she could. She employed hundreds of women who did nothing but sprinkle the United States with feminism, like a chef would pepper a sirloin steak. We must hold on to our victories, my fellow women. Remember that in the game of patriarchy, women are not the opposing team. They are the ball. Dr. Sarkeesian was a scary smart, hypnotically twisted in psychotic ways. When she spoke, women would come from miles around. She was immensely popular, a very gifted speaker. Audiences would hang on her every word. Much of it didn't make any sense, and her ability to cavil was legendary.